The testing chamber hummed with the kind of sterile efficiency that made my mandibles itch. I am Krevthor of the Galactic Security Council, and in my 300 cycles of service, I have evaluated thousands of species for their threat assessment capabilities. Humans? They were supposed to be easy. Laughably easy, in fact. "Attention, candidates!" My translator clicked and whirred as I addressed the assembled group of human recruits. 27 of them, sitting in neat rows inside the observation deck of Station Kepler 9. Today's examination will determine whether your species possesses the tactical awareness necessary for council membership. You will be shown various scenarios, entities, and individuals. Your task? Identify which ones pose genuine danger. I watched their faces, these strange mammals with their absurdly mobile features and wet little eyes. Most of them leaned forward eagerly. Typical. Young species always wanted to prove themselves, wanted to flex whatever pitiful survival instincts evolution had bothered to give them. Row 1 was packed with the obvious candidates. Military types, every single one. Buzz cuts, straight postures, eyes that never stopped scanning. Commander Jake Thornton sat front and center, chest covered in medals that probably meant something impressive to his kind. Next to him was Lieutenant Maya Patel, whose service record suggested she could field strip a plasma rifle blindfolded. These were the ones I expected to pass. The ones who looked dangerous because they were trained to be dangerous. Row 2 held the academics and specialists. Dr. Felix Morrison, xenobiology expert with 14 published papers on predator recognition patterns. Beside him sat Victoria Grant, psychological warfare consultant who had apparently broken 3 separate terrorist cells using nothing but conversation and patience. Smart ones, these. The kind who think threats through, who analyze and calculate. But row 3? Row 3 was odd. The girl sitting in seat 3C had shown up in clothes that looked like she had grabbed them from a donation bin. Faded jacket, scuffed boots, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail that had given up halfway through the day. Her registration form listed her name as Emma Torres, age 22, occupation, student. No military service, no advanced degrees, no special certifications. The council liaison who processed her application had actually laughed, assumed there was some administrative error. She sat there now, slouched in her chair like she was waiting for a bus, not participating in the most important evaluation her species had ever faced. While everyone else had brought tablets, styluses, recording devices, she had shown up with a cheap notebook and a pen that was clearly running out of ink. I had tried to have her removed. Twice. Both times, the Council Oversight Committee had denied my request. "All registered humans may participate," they said. "We judge species, not individuals." Bureaucratic nonsense, if you ask me, but I had my orders. "First scenario," I announced, and the holographic display flickered to life in the center of the chamber. The image showed a Vraxian merchant, all 6 arms laden with what appeared to be exotic goods. Vraxians were known throughout the galaxy as traders, deal-makers, the kind of species that could sell starship fuel to a sun. This particular specimen looked friendly enough, mandibles curved upward, in what their kind considered a welcoming expression. "You encounter this individual at a spaceport," I continued. "Do they pose a threat? You have 30 seconds. Mark your answers now." The room erupted in the soft scratching of styluses on tablets. I watched the responses flood into my datapad. As expected, 90% of the humans marked no threat. The merchant's body language was open, non-aggressive, textbook safe. Commander Thornton marked potential threat, low probability, cautious, but reasonable. Dr. Morrison marked no threat with a note about Vraxian cultural norms, also reasonable. Emma Torres, in row 3, she marked high threat and went back to staring at nothing in particular. I felt my secondary hearts skip a rhythm. Random guess, had to be. Humans were notorious for their gambling tendencies, their bizarre willingness to choose randomly when uncertain. She had probably just picked an answer without thinking. Second scenario! I pulled up the next image, a personal favorite. It showed a Korthek warrior, 2 meters of scaled muscle and rage, holding a weapon that could vaporize a small building. The creature's eyes glowed red. Its mouth was open in what was clearly a battle roar, and every aspect of its posture screamed violence. This was the gimme question, the one that sorted the complete idiots from everyone else. 30 seconds later, I checked the results. 100% of the humans had marked high threat. Even the ones who were clearly guessing had gotten this right. Korthak warriors were famous throughout the galaxy for their aggression, their love of combat, their complete inability to not be threatening. Every single human got it right, except Emma Torres. She marked no threat and started doodling something in the margin of her notebook. My mandibles clicked in irritation. Okay, so the girl was either playing some kind of joke, or she was genuinely the least perceptive creature I had ever encountered. Either way, she was about to embarrass her entire species, and I would have front-row seats to the disaster. Scenario 3! I tried to keep the annoyance out of my voice. Professional, I reminded myself. Stay professional. The hologram shifted to show a Delphine child, barely past its first molting, playing with what appeared to be an educational toy. Delphines were pacifists, known throughout the galaxy for their poetry, their philosophy, their complete and utter harmlessness. This particular juvenile had the kind of face that made even Vraxians go soft, big liquid eyes and a smile that radiated innocence. The humans responded predictably. No threat dominated the answers, with a few cautious souls marking unknown, insufficient data. Dr. Morrison wrote a small essay about Delphine child-rearing practices and their cultural aversion to violence. Emma Torres marked moderate threat and yawned. I was starting to think she was doing this deliberately. Some kind of human protest art, perhaps? Were they really so arrogant that they would sabotage their own evaluation just to make some incomprehensible point? We will now move to live assessment, I announced, probably with more edge in my voice than proper protocol suggested. I will bring various individuals into this chamber. You will observe them for exactly 5 minutes. Then, you will mark whether they pose a threat. No additional context will be provided. Trust your instincts. Trust your training. Trust whatever primitive pattern recognition software evolution installed in your brains. The first subject entered through the side door. A Qualan merchant, species known for their honesty, their fair dealing, their pathological inability to deceive. This particular specimen, registered as Miveret, had agreed to participate for a modest fee. He waved at the assembled humans with his primary manipulator, chittered a greeting in broken English, and proceeded to arrange a small display of trade goods on a portable table. Charming, really. The kind of entity you would want to buy souvenirs from. The 5 minutes passed. The humans marked their responses. 95% said no threat. Commander Thornton hedged with low threat, situational. Dr. Morrison wrote another essay, this time about Qualan trade ethics and bonding rituals. Emma Torres marked high threat, immediate, and went back to her doodling. I felt my patience wearing thin. This was absurd. The girl was either brain damaged or mocking the entire evaluation process. I made a note to file a formal complaint with the council about screening procedures. Clearly, humans needed better quality control on their candidates. The second subject entered. A Theran warrior, hired from a local security guild. Therans were apex predators on their homeworld, evolved from pack hunters, and this particular specimen was impressive even by their standards. Nearly 3 meters tall, covered in chitinous plates that could deflect most small arms fire, carrying weapons that hummed with barely contained violence. The creature moved with the kind of predatory grace that made every prey instinct in my body scream warnings. It paced the front of the chamber like a caged storm, its multiple eyes tracking the humans with unsettling focus. When it spoke, its voice resonated in frequencies that made the walls vibrate. 5 minutes of barely contained menace. The humans responded accordingly. 100% marked high threat or extreme threat. Several of them had physically recoiled when the Theron entered. Commander Thornton's hand had actually moved toward his sidearm, a completely unconscious gesture that his training had drilled into muscle memory. I checked Emma Torres's response, already knowing what I would find. No threat. Of course. Of course. The girl marked no threat on a creature that was literally designed by evolution to kill things and had clearly been hired specifically to look as dangerous as possible. At this point, I was convinced she was just marking answers randomly, or worse, marking the opposite of the obvious answer for some bizarre human reason. The third subject entered, and this is where things got interesting. She was human. Female, based on the typical classification markers your species uses. Mid-30s, professional attire, carrying a briefcase. Her name tag identified her as Dr. Rebecca Walsh, registered xenopsychologist. She smiled warmly at the assembled candidates, set her briefcase down on the provided table, and began what appeared to be a completely benign presentation about cross-species communication strategies. Her voice was soothing, her gestures open and welcoming. She made eye contact with various humans in the audience, occasionally asked rhetorical questions, demonstrated a few basic concepts using holographic aids. Textbook friendly, textbook safe, textbook boring. The 5 minutes concluded. 98% of the humans marked no threat. Dr. Morrison marked no threat, with extensive notes about how her presentation style aligned with established trust-building protocols. Commander Thornton marked no threat, and actually seemed to relax for the first time since the test began. 2 humans marked something different. The first was Lieutenant Patel in row 2, who marked potential threat, unknown confidence level, with a note that read, something off about eye contact patterns. The second was Emma Torres in row 3, who marked extreme threat, immediate action required, in letters so heavy they nearly tore through her cheap notebook paper. I stared at the response, stared at it while Dr. Walsh concluded her presentation, thanked everyone for their attention, and exited through the same door she had entered. Stared at it while the rest of the humans began comparing notes, confident in their assessments, probably already planning their celebration parties for when they passed. Then my datapad chimed. Priority alert, Council security. The message was brief. Dr. Rebecca Walsh is not Dr. Rebecca Walsh. Subject is Xylith infiltrator, detained at exit checkpoint. Biochemical weapon detected in briefcase lining. Station lockdown initiated. Threat neutralized. My manipulators went numb. A Xylith infiltrator. Here, on a council testing station, carrying a weapon that could have killed everyone in this chamber and probably everyone on the station. Xylith were shapeshifters, rare and dangerous, species that the council had been trying to track for decades. They could mimic appearance, voice, even thermal signatures. Perfect predators, perfect assassins, perfect nightmares. And this one had walked right past our security, right past our scanners, right past me. I looked up at the assembled humans. Most of them were still chatting, still confident, still clueless. Commander Thornton was already packing up his gear, clearly assuming he had aced the test. Dr. Morrison was engaged in an animated discussion about Vraxian trade practices with the person next to him. Lieutenant Patel looked troubled, staring at her tablet like it had betrayed her. And Emma Torres? She was looking directly at me. Not at the door where Dr. Walsh had exited. Not at her notebook. At me. And for the first time since she had entered this chamber, her expression was something other than bored indifference. She looked sad. No, not sad. Disappointed? Resigned? Like she had just watched something inevitable and unfortunate play out exactly as she had known it would. My translator struggled to find words. The test is, we are concluding early. Please remain seated while Council Security completes station protocols. The humans erupted in confused murmurs. Security personnel began filing into the chamber, professional and efficient. They would escort everyone to holding areas, conduct interviews, make sure there were no other infiltrators. Standard procedure for a compromised station. I moved through the crowd toward row 3, my hearts hammering in rhythms they had not hammered in decades. Emma Torres watched me approach, her expression neutral now, carefully neutral. You, I said, my translator clicking more than usual. You mark the Xylith as an extreme threat. She shrugged, one shoulder rising and falling in that peculiar human gesture. Yeah. How? Our scanners did not detect it. Our security protocols did not flag it. I did not notice anything unusual, and I have 3 centuries of threat assessment experience. How did you know? She was quiet for a moment, playing with the pen in her hands. Then, softly, almost like she did not want to say it, she smiled wrong. Smiled? Wrong. The others, the alien subjects, they moved like themselves. The merchant, the warrior, they were what they were, comfortable in their bodies. But Dr. Walsh, she smiled like someone who learned smiling from a manual. Technically correct, all the right muscles, but just off. Like she was wearing the expression instead of making it. And her eyes, they tracked people, but only after they moved. Normal humans, we anticipate movement, follow it unconsciously. She was reacting, not predicting. Tiny delay, maybe a quarter second, but consistent. I felt something cold settle into my central ganglion. And the Vraxian merchant, the one you marked as high threat? His third arm on the left side, kept twitching toward a pouch on his belt. Nervous gesture, except Vraxians do not get nervous during simple trade demonstrations. It is, against their cultural programming, either he was not Vraxian, or that pouch contained something that made him very anxious about this situation. Either way, threat. The Delphine child? Too old to be acting that young. Delphines hit developmental milestones at predictable rates. That one was physically past first molting, but behaviorally acting like a pre-molt juvenile. Either drugged, or not actually a child, or being controlled somehow. Maybe all 3. Any of those scenarios, dangerous. And the Korthak warrior? The one you marked as safe? She smiled, and it was a real smile, the kind that reached her eyes. He was terrified. Whole body screaming fear signals trying to look aggressive. Pupils dilated wrong, breathing shallow. Weight distribution kept shifting backward even when he moved forward. He was acting, putting on a show because someone paid him to look scary. He was about as dangerous as a puppy wearing fake teeth. The security teams were organizing the other humans now, moving them toward the exit protocols. Emma Torres stood up, slinging her worn bag over her shoulder. She looked tired, like she had been tired for a long time. "Most of your questions had obvious answers," she continued, voice quiet enough that only I could hear. "Big scary thing is scary. Friendly thing is friendly. You were testing whether we could recognize the usual threats. But the real test, the one that matters, that is whether we can recognize the unusual ones. The threats that do not look like threats. The dangers that smile and shake hands and make presentations." She started toward the exit, then paused. "For what it is worth, I am sorry I messed up your evaluation. I know my answers made your data weird. But you asked us to identify threats, and I did. Not my fault everyone else was looking for monsters instead of paying attention." I watched her walk away, this scruffy human girl in her discount clothes, with her dying pen, and felt the weight of 300 cycles of service pressing down on my carapace. "Wait!" I called out, my translator probably mangling the desperate edge in my voice. "The Council requires additional evaluation for candidates who demonstrate exceptional performance. You will need to remain on station." She turned back, eyebrow raised. "Exceptional performance? I got almost everything wrong by your scoring system." "You got everything right," I corrected. "And that is far more concerning than getting everything wrong. Your species has been evaluated by 17 different council members over the past 50 cycles. Every single assessment concluded that humans were average in threat detection, adequate for support roles, but not security positions. You just undermined 50 cycles of data in 40 minutes. So what happens now?" I wished I knew. Protocol for this situation did not exist because this situation was not supposed to happen. Humans were not supposed to outperform council evaluators on council-designed tests. They were supposed to be enthusiastic, brave, loyal, all those qualities that made excellent support troops and trade partners. They were not supposed to see through Xylith infiltrators that had fooled council security. "Now," I said carefully, "we run more tests, many more tests, and we figure out if you are an exceptional individual or if your entire species has been hiding what they are really capable of." She sighed, and it was the sigh of someone who had seen this coming too. "Can I at least get better coffee? The stuff in the waiting area tastes like someone filtered it through a gym sock." Despite everything, despite the compromised station and the detained infiltrator and the complete destruction of my carefully planned evaluation, I felt my mandibles quirk in what might have been amusement. "I will see what we can arrange," I said. As she followed the security escort toward the secondary evaluation chambers, I pulled up her file again on my datapad. Emma Torres, age 22, student, no special qualifications. There had to be something, some indicator I had missed, some detail that would explain how she had done what she had done. Her educational history was unremarkable. Standard public schooling, decent grades, but nothing extraordinary. Her employment record showed various service jobs, waitress, retail clerk, briefly a security guard at some human shopping complex. Wait, I expanded the security guard entry. 3 months, employed by a company called Secure Space Solutions. Terminated for, and I had to run this through my translator twice to make sure I was reading it correctly. Excessive vigilance and making customers uncomfortable with constant threat assessment behavior. The termination report included a note from her supervisor. Employee Torres repeatedly reported suspicious individuals who turned out to be ordinary customers. Created tense environment. Recommend counseling for paranoia. Below that, a second note, added later in different formatting. Note: 3 of the individuals Torres reported were later arrested for shoplifting. 1 for attempting to place skimming devices on payment terminals. 1 for carrying concealed weapons without permit. Employee assessment may require review. I closed the file and looked toward the door where Emma Torres had disappeared. Somewhere on this station, that human girl was probably complaining about coffee, while council security scrambled to understand how she had accomplished something that should not have been possible. And I, Krevthor of the Galactic Security Council, 300 cycles of service, expert in threat assessment and species evaluation, had to write a report explaining how a 22-year-old human in thrift store clothes had just exposed fundamental flaws in our security protocols. The Council was not going to like this. Not one bit. But as I began drafting my incident report, I could not quite suppress a feeling that might have been satisfaction or respect, or possibly just relief that Emma Torres was on our side. For now, anyway. The secondary evaluation chamber was smaller than the first, more intimate, and infinitely more uncomfortable. They had moved me here 6 hours ago, offered me that terrible coffee I had complained about, which somehow tasted even worse than before, and then proceeded to run me through scenario after scenario after scenario, until my eyes burned and my handwriting devolved into illegible scrawls. Krevthor sat across from me now, his mandibles doing that clicking thing they did when he was processing something that did not fit his worldview. Behind him stood 3 other council members: a Thaxian, whose name I could not pronounce, a floating jellyfish-looking creature called Advisor Loom, and something that resembled a very angry crystalline rock formation that apparently went by Enforcer Tavik. "Explain again," Krevthor said, his translator rendering his frustration into flat mechanical English, "how you identified Agent Sarex." I shifted in my chair, which had clearly been designed for a species with a different skeletal structure. Which one was Agent Sarex? The Qualan merchant, the one with the nervous twitch. Oh, right. I already told you. The arm thing, the pouch, the whole vibe was wrong for a Qualan doing standard trade demonstration work. The jellyfish creature, Advisor Loom, pulsed in colors I had no context for. Its translator hummed. Agent Sarex was a deep-cover operative testing our internal security. He has successfully infiltrated 47 different facilities over the past decade. His Qualan disguise is considered flawless by our best analysts. You saw through it in 5 minutes. 4 minutes, I corrected. I was pretty sure by minute 2, but I wanted to observe longer to be certain. Enforcer Tavik made a sound like grinding gravel. The Delphine. Explain that one. I suppressed a groan. We had been over this, multiple times. The child was not a child. Developmental markers were inconsistent. Physical age did not match behavioral presentation. Something was wrong there. The Delphine was 32 cycles old, Krevthor said quietly. Suffering from Varath syndrome, a degenerative neurological condition that causes developmental regression. You correctly identified a sick individual as a potential threat based purely on observable behavioral inconsistencies. Okay, that made me feel slightly terrible. Is the Delphine okay? I mean, I did not want anyone to actually arrest a sick kid. The Delphine is receiving treatment at our medical facilities and is no longer your concern, Tavik ground out. What concerns us is how you identified them as anomalous in the first place. Most species register sick or disabled individuals as requiring assistance, not as threats. I rubbed my eyes, trying to articulate something I had never really needed to articulate before. Threats are not always about intention. That Delphine was behaving unpredictably, which means their actions could not be reliably forecasted. Unpredictable entities in controlled environments represent elevated risk regardless of intent. I did not mark them as malicious. I marked them as a moderate threat, which in that context meant someone whose behavior I could not predict, and therefore needed to monitor more carefully. The Thaxian, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. Its translator produced a voice like wind through metal. And the Korthak warrior? Hired actor trying way too hard. Next question. There is no next question, Krevthor said. We have asked you about every single evaluation subject 17 times now. Your answers remain consistent. Your reasoning remains sound. Your observational acuity remains inexplicable. So can I go? I have a paper due next week, and I really need to not fail Introduction to Molecular Biology. Advisor Loom pulsed again, colors shifting to what might have been agitation. You understand that you have just exposed critical vulnerabilities in Council security infrastructure? The Xylith infiltrator alone represents a catastrophic intelligence failure. If she had succeeded in deploying her weapon, casualty estimates range from 300 to 15,000 depending on dispersion patterns. The weight of that settled on me like a physical thing. 15,000 people dead. Because a shapeshifter smiled wrong and nobody noticed except the dropout sitting in row 3. I need you to understand something, I said, choosing my words carefully. I am not special. I am not some genius or prodigy or whatever you think I am. I am just someone who pays attention. Clearly, your species does not agree, Tavik rumbled. Your employment termination records suggest your peers found your vigilance excessive and disturbing. Yeah, well, my peers also thought it was fine to ignore the guy casing the jewelry store for 3 days straight, so maybe their judgment is not the best metric. Krevthor's mandibles clicked rapidly. We have reviewed your complete history, Emma Torres. Every job, every school, every documented interaction we could access through legal channels. Do you know what pattern emerges? I had a pretty good idea, but I let him continue. You see things others miss. You notice details that should be irrelevant. You identify patterns in chaos. And every single time you raise concerns, you are dismissed, ignored, or punished for being disruptive. Your entire life is a documentation of a skill set that your own species considers defective. That stung, probably because it was accurate. Your species evaluation rankings are about to change dramatically, Loom stated. The Council will need to reassess human threat detection capabilities in light of this data. No, I said quickly. You really should not do that. 4 alien entities stared at me with whatever sensory organs they possessed. Krevthor spoke first. Elaborate. Look, I bombed your test, on purpose at first. I marked the Vraxian as dangerous, knowing full well that 90% of humans would mark them safe. I marked the Korthak as safe knowing everyone else would freak out. I did it because I was annoyed that I got dragged to this evaluation in the first place, and because I figured my answers would not matter since, obviously, Commander Thornton and Dr. Morrison and all those actually qualified people would carry the species average. You intentionally provided incorrect answers? I provided accurate answers that I knew contradicted the expected responses. There is a difference. And here is the thing. I am an outlier. A weird, paranoid, socially maladjusted outlier. Most humans cannot do what I do. Most humans should not do what I do, because living like this kind of sucks, actually. I stood up, started pacing, because sitting still was making my anxiety worse. You want to know why I got fired from that security job? Because I made families uncomfortable. I watched a mom with her kids for 15 minutes because something about her body language seemed off. And it turned out she was just stressed because one of her kids had a fever and she was trying to shop quickly. I called security on an elderly man because his gait pattern changed, and it turned out he had just tweaked his back reaching for something on a high shelf. I was right often enough to be vindicated, but wrong often enough to be insufferable. Yet your accuracy rate in our evaluations exceeded 97%, Tavik observed, because your test was artificial. Controlled environment, limited variables, subjects who were deliberately chosen to represent specific threat categories. Real life is messier. In real life, most suspicious behavior is just normal people having bad days. Most anomalies are coincidence. Most threats are not threats at all. And if you recalibrate your species assessment based on me, you are going to get a very skewed picture of what humans are actually capable of. Krevthor was quiet for a long moment, his mandibles completely still. Then, what do you think we should do? Test more humans, lots more. Run the same evaluation on a proper sample size. I guarantee you that most of them will perform exactly average, exactly like your previous assessments predicted. I am statistical noise, not a representative sample. And if we find more humans with your capabilities? I shrugged. Then maybe my species is more observant than your previous tests suggested, but I really doubt you will find many. People like me are rare for evolutionary reasons. We are the paranoid ancestors who heard every snapping twig and assumed saber-toothed tiger. Useful for survival, terrible for social cohesion. Most of us get selected out of the gene pool one way or another. Advisor Loom pulsed in a pattern that my brain wanted to interpret as thoughtful. You present a compelling argument for your own irrelevance. I present a realistic argument against drawing sweeping conclusions from insufficient data. If you want to understand human threat detection capabilities, you need more than one paranoid college student who could not hold down a retail job. The Thaxian made a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. Nevertheless, the fact remains that you detected threats our own security systems missed. This has operational value regardless of your species average. And there it was. The thing I had been dreading since they moved me to this secondary chamber. You want to hire me? I said flatly. We want to utilize your abilities in service of Council security, Krevthor corrected. You would be assigned to threat assessment and infiltration detection. High-level clearance, substantial compensation, opportunities to prevent exactly the kind of catastrophic scenario that almost occurred today. I looked at him, at all of them. These alien beings who had just watched their security apparatus fail, and were now scrambling for solutions. And if I say no? You are not a prisoner, Loom pulsed. You may refuse and return to your life. Your student visa for Station Kepler 9 will be extended as originally planned. You may complete your education, pursue whatever career you choose. We cannot compel your service. But you really, really want me to say yes. We would prefer it, Krevthor admitted. You have a skill that could save lives. Many lives. It seems wasteful to let that ability languish in service of molecular biology, studies you are currently failing. Hey, I am pulling a solid C-. Thank you very much. Tavik ground forward slightly. Is that good? It is not failing, technically. They waited, these council representatives, while I processed what they were offering. A job, a real job, doing something I was apparently good at. Recognition instead of termination. Validation instead of being called paranoid. It sounded too good, which meant it probably was. What is the catch? I asked. Catch? Krevthor's translator struggled with the idiom. The downside. The part you are not mentioning, because it will make me less likely to agree. More silence. Then Loom pulsed in colors that seemed almost apologetic. Your effectiveness depends partially on your humanity, your baseline understanding of human behavior, your instinctive threat assessment calibrated to your species' norms. If you spend extensive time in council service, surrounded by alien species and alien behavioral patterns, you may lose some of that calibration. You may become less effective at identifying human threats specifically. So I would be trading my connection to my own species for the ability to protect other species? Crudely stated, but essentially accurate. I thought about the humans back in the first testing chamber. Commander Thornton with his medals and his confidence, Dr. Morrison with his essays and his expertise, Lieutenant Patel who had actually noticed something was off, even if she had not been certain. My people, my weird, chaotic, beautiful species that could not see threats right in front of them, but could land robots on distant planets and write symphonies and fall in love over terrible coffee. Can I think about it? I asked. You may take 72 hours, Krevthor said. After that, we will need your decision. The Council moves slowly on most matters, but security vulnerabilities demand prompt resolution. They dismissed me then, assigned me quarters on the station, gave me access codes and meal vouchers and a communication device that looked like it cost more than my entire education. I wandered back through corridors that hummed with alien life, past species I could name and species I could not, until I found an observation deck overlooking the planet below. Earth hung there in the viewport, blue and white and achingly familiar. Somewhere down there, people were living normal lives, going to work, falling in love, arguing about sports, completely oblivious to the fact that an alien shapeshifter had nearly murdered thousands of people on a space station they did not know existed. My communication device chimed. A message from an unknown sender, text only. Observation Deck C7, if you want company. I found Lieutenant Patel sitting on a bench near the starboard viewport, still in her uniform, looking tired in the way that suggested she had been debriefed as extensively as I had. They told me you were the one who actually got it right, she said as I sat down. The Xylith. I marked it as potential threat, but I was not confident. You were certain. Lucky guess? She snorted. Right. Lucky. That is why they have been grilling you for 6 hours. We sat in silence for a moment, watching Earth turn slowly below us. Then she said, quietly, I almost had her. I saw the eye contact thing, the tracking pattern. But I second-guessed myself. Figured I was being paranoid, that a xenopsychologist would have professional training that explained the behavior. I talked myself out of trusting my instincts. Your instincts were good, I said. You noticed the same anomaly I did. You just weighted the social pressure to conform higher than the threat assessment data. Is that the nice way of saying I chickened out? It is the accurate way of saying humans are social creatures who value group cohesion, and going against group consensus carries significant psychological cost. You are a military officer. Your entire career is built on chain of command, trust in authority, belief that the people running things know what they are doing. Marking a council-approved presenter as a threat would have been a huge deviation from your training. She looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw recognition there. But you do not care about group consensus, do you? I care. I just weight it lower than other variables. Makes me write more often and liked less consistently. They offered you a job? How did you know? Because they offered me one too. Junior, position, human liaison to Council Security Forces. I think they are hedging their bets, bringing on multiple humans in case their species evaluation really was that far off. She paused. Are you going to take it? I did not answer immediately. Down below, Earth continued its rotation, indifferent to the decisions being made in orbit. Somewhere down there, people who thought like Commander Thornton were sleeping soundly, confident in their assessments. People who thought like Dr. Morrison were writing papers about alien behavioral patterns. People who thought like me were probably getting fired from another retail job for being too vigilant. I do not know, I admitted. You? I am military, following orders, protecting people. That is what I signed up for. Seems like this is just a bigger version of the same thing. She smiled, but it did not quite reach her eyes. Plus, the pay is apparently incredible, and my student loans are not going to pay themselves. Practical. Someone has to be. She stood, stretched, started toward the exit. Then she paused. For what it is worth, I am glad you were in row 3, even if you did make the rest of us look like idiots. After she left, I sat alone in the observation deck for another hour, watching Earth spin, thinking about Xylith infiltrators and Quallen merchants, and Delphine children who were not children at all. Thinking about a life spent seeing threats in shadows, being right just often enough to justify the constant vigilance, being wrong just often enough to seem crazy. The communication device chimed again. This time, it was Krevthor. Before you decide, there is something you should see. Detention Level 5, Cell Block Theta. You have clearance. I should have gone back to my assigned quarters. Should have slept, processed, made a rational decision based on careful consideration of all variables. Instead, I found myself in an elevator descending into the secure levels of the station, past checkpoints that scanned me with technologies I could not begin to understand, until I stood outside a cell with walls that looked like they were made of solidified light. Inside was the Xylith, or what I assumed was the Xylith's true form, since the Dr. Rebecca Walsh disguise was gone. It was vaguely humanoid, but the details were wrong in ways that made my eyes hurt to process. Too many joints in the limbs, skin that seemed to shift texture constantly, facial features that did not quite settle into any fixed configuration. Krevthor stood beside me, his mandibles still. She has been trying to escape for the past 4 hours, attempted 3 different disguises, tested 17 different psychological manipulation strategies, threatened, begged, and negotiated. Nothing has worked. Our containment systems are designed specifically for Xylith capabilities. Why did you want me to see this? Because you asked what the catch was. This is the catch, Emma Torres. If you join Council Security, this is what you will face. Entities that can become anyone, that can fool our best technology, that can only be detected by the kind of instinctive observation you possess. You will spend your life looking at people and wondering who is real. You will second-guess every interaction, doubt every smile, question every gesture. You will become more isolated, more paranoid, more like this creature than like the humans you are trying to protect. The Xylith moved closer to the transparent wall, and for a moment its features stabilized into something almost human. Almost. She sees us, it said, voice shifting between registers. The little human sees us. How does she see us? I looked at it, this shapeshifter that had nearly killed thousands, and felt something cold and analytical slide into place. Because you are trying too hard. Real people are messy, inconsistent, irrational. You are performing humanity, but performance is always slightly off. You are thinking about how to move instead of just moving. You are acting natural instead of being natural. It stared at me with eyes that could not decide what color to be. Then it laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. She understands. She is like us, watching, analyzing, never quite part of the pattern. You belong with us, little observer, not with them. Krevthor pulled me away from the cell, his manipulator surprisingly gentle on my shoulder. This is what I wanted you to understand. You have a gift, but gifts come with prices. You can return to Earth, live a normal life, be frustrated and underemployed and ordinary. Or you can stay here, use your abilities to prevent catastrophes, and become something other than what you were. Neither choice is wrong. Both have consequences. I looked back at the cell, at the Xylith still wearing its almost human face, still watching me with interest that felt predatory and curious in equal measure. Then I looked at Krevthor, this alien bureaucrat who had spent 3 centuries evaluating species and probably never expected a human in thrift store clothes to upend his entire framework. I need to know something, I said. The test today, the whole evaluation, was it really about species assessment, or were you specifically looking for people like me? His mandibles clicked, and I got the distinct impression he was surprised by the question. Initially, species assessment, standard protocol. But after the first 3 scenarios, after watching your answers deviate so consistently from the pattern, I began to suspect. The later scenarios, particularly Dr. Walsh, were specifically designed to be difficult, to require exactly the kind of observational acuity you possess. We needed to know if your abilities were real or random chance. So you put an actual infiltrator in the test, risked an actual catastrophe to see if I would notice. We had safeguards, multiple layers of security, fail-safe protocols. The risk was calculated, but not 0. No, not 0. I thought about that, about being tested with live ammunition, about being evaluated based on my ability to prevent actual disasters rather than theoretical ones. It should have made me angry. Probably would have made me angry if I had not understood the logic behind it. 72 hours, I said. You will have my answer then. I spent those 72 hours doing what I always did when facing major decisions. I watched people, walked the station corridors, sat in communal areas, observed aliens and humans interacting with varying degrees of success. I saw a Vraxian merchant negotiating with a human trader, both of them gesturing enthusiastically despite having no common language beyond their translators. I saw a group of Thaxian engineers teaching human technicians about their quantum drive systems, explaining complex mathematics through diagrams and patience. I saw species who should have been enemies sharing meals, telling jokes that barely survived translation, building something that looked suspiciously like friendship. And I saw the threats, too. Saw a Qualan whose body language suggested concealment, though he turned out to just be hiding a gift for his mate. Saw a human whose nervous behavior suggested malicious intent, though she was just anxious about her first day at a new job. Saw patterns and anomalies and false positives everywhere, because that was what my brain did. That was how I processed the world. On the 3rd day, I returned to Krevthor's office. He was reviewing something on his datapad, mandibles moving in what I had learned to recognize as concentration. He looked up when I entered. You have reached a decision? I have questions first. If I do this, if I join Council security, can I still visit Earth? Can I maintain contact with humans? Yes, recommended, actually. Maintaining cultural connection helps prevent the isolation I warned you about. And if I find more humans like me, people with similar observational abilities? We would evaluate them, same as we evaluated you. Offer positions if they qualify, respect their refusal if they decline. One more thing, the Delphine, the one with Vareth syndrome. I want updates on their treatment, and I want to know that flagging them as anomalous did not result in any additional suffering. Krevthor's mandibles curved in what might have been approval. The Delphine is responding well to treatment, and specifically requested that we thank the human who noticed their condition. Their family had been unaware of the syndrome's progression. Your observation likely saved their life. That hit differently than I expected. All this time worrying I had caused harm, and instead I had accidentally helped. Maybe there was something to be said for being the paranoid one in row 3. Okay, I said. I will do it. 3-year contract, with option to renew or terminate based on mutual agreement. I want it in writing that I can leave if this stops working for me. Acceptable. Welcome to Council. Security, Officer Torres. One condition. I do not want to be the human who sees threats everywhere. I want to be the person who helps others learn to see them, too. Training, consultation, developing better evaluation protocols. If I am really that much better at this than your current systems, then the solution is not just hiring me. It is figuring out what I am doing that your systems are not, and teaching it. Krevthor was quiet for a long moment. Then, you want to make yourself obsolete? I want to make catastrophic security failures obsolete. If that means teaching 1,000 other people to do what I do, even partially, that is better than being the only one who notices when something is wrong. He extended a manipulator, and I shook it, sealing an agreement between a paranoid human and an alien bureaucrat who had learned that sometimes the most important data comes from the person sitting quietly in row 3. 6 months later, I stood in front of a new class of evaluation candidates. Multi-species this time. Humans, Vraxians, Qualans, even a few Thaxians who had expressed interest in security work. They sat in neat rows, eager and nervous, and completely unprepared for what I was about to teach them. "Attention, candidates," I said, and my voice echoed through the chamber. "Today, we are going to learn about threat assessment. Not the kind you read about in manuals, not the kind that reduces danger to checklists and protocols. The real kind. The kind that keeps you alive when everything else fails." Behind me, Krevthor clicked his mandibles in what I had learned to recognize as amusement. In the back row, Lieutenant Patel took notes, already 3 months into her own position and still convinced she had something to learn. And somewhere in row 3 sat a young Qualan who had scored impossibly high on preliminary evaluations, who apparently could spot deception patterns with the same ease I spotted behavioral inconsistencies. Maybe I was not such an outlier after all. Maybe every species had their paranoid ancestors, their hypervigilant observers, their people who saw too much and got punished for it. Maybe the trick was not suppressing those abilities, but learning when to trust them. "First lesson," I continued, watching their faces, their appendages, their various attention-indicating anatomical features. "Most threats do not look like threats. The universe is full of friendly monsters and dangerous friends. Your job is to figure out which is which before it is too late. Now, let us begin." And in that moment, standing in front of species from across the galaxy, teaching them to see what I saw, I finally understood why I had been sitting in row 3 that day. Not because I was exceptional, because I was necessary. The test is never really over. The threats keep coming, wearing new faces, learning new tactics, finding new ways to slip past security, and smile wrong and almost succeed. But now, instead of facing them alone, dismissed, and doubted and called paranoid, I faced them with an entire council of observers learning to pay attention. It was not perfect. Nothing ever is. But it was better. And sometimes, better is enough.